focused on what you're doing. You minimize distractions externally, but most importantly, internally. And you stay to your meditation topic or whatever is holding you in that center position for observation and calming. Or, and more broadly, it means in your life. So it's not just talking about in our practice, but this teaching, this particular teaching of dhyana, is not referring merely to a meditation practice one takes up on a cushion in a temple or a monastery or even at home, and then goes into a different state once the cushion's tucked away or the bell rings or we leave the temple. What they're talking about is using the meditation practice as a mechanism or as a vehicle for getting back into the totality of the awakened life. So meditation is only necessary to the degree that we departed from this original or fundamental nature. So practice here has both meanings. And that's why he says if we can right at this moment, doesn't mean just right at the moment of meditating, it means right in this very moment, here and now. If in this very moment, here and now, which is where everything is happening, things from the past are passing into and informing and shaping the conditions and possibilities of this present moment, and how we respond and deal with those in the present moment basically sets in motion what's going to be coming down the road. But what has happened before and what's going to happen is not fixed or fated. It's not destiny, but it's rather in this very fluid possibility or potential of the present moment to adjust, to change, to correct, to modify, to add, and so forth. So this moment is really what's always being talked about. And that's what it means by this mind, this moment. Awaken to our own mind. If we can awaken to that potential, that possibility, all of what is available to us, if we can see that and use that in the present moment, he says all phenomena of objects and appearances will dissolve. This is talking about the sort of constructed reality that comes from attachments, that comes from aversion, comes from liking, disliking, fear, worry, fantasy, pretension, so forth. All phenomena and appearances he's talking about is not that reality will disappear or the world will vanish, but a perception of the world as a constructed movie sort of that we're running, that will stop. And we will see things as they really are as opposed to what we imagine them to be or fear them to be, and so forth. So be clear what he's talking about. He's talking about the illusory world, or what I'd like to term is the upside-down dream world. This is a good expression. The upside-down dream world will right itself and the dream will dissolve. As within a blazing hot furnace. This is really a powerful image. The blazing hot furnace is both a metaphor, but it's also talking about the light, the energy that you generate in the practice of cultivating. So this is called returning the light to illumine within, Wei Guang Fan Chao. When you bring that light back, and sometimes even in the imagery, the human body is presented as this temple or this kiln within which one is smelting away the dross and the impurities of attachments and klesha, and refining something like raw ore into gold. And this is an image that comes from the Avatamsaka Sutra. It says, as you put that raw material back again in the furnace, again and again, burning off all the impurities and slag, eventually the substance becomes more and more pure until it's pure gold. And again, this is both metaphor, but also describing a transformative process. And that's why it's going to be, these next two lines are very important. What is it you're transforming? You're not throwing out the the raw material and going and buying gold on the market, so to speak. But what you're doing is you're taking the very raw material and transforming it into something else. And it's that raw material that is a substance of Bodhi. And that's why in the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, there's this kind of paradoxical expression that the afflictions, Phanau, Klesha, are just Puti, are just Bodhi. And Bodhi is just the afflictions. They're a single substance in different forms or different manifestations. So therefore, when he's talking about this blazing furnace, you're sitting on, in a sense, the raw material that has to be smelted and transformed into the light of wisdom. And that means the stuff of darkness, the stuff of accumulated mud, swamp, whatever you want to use metaphor, that has to be sifted, that has to be purified, that has to be worked with, and that's not necessarily a comfortable experience at the beginning. It gets more comfortable as you get more gold, or it becomes gold. But at the beginning, it just seems like a lot of messy work. And sometimes the meditation process at the beginning is almost overwhelming in the sense that till you sat down to look at it, it didn't seem like there was quite a mess there. Somehow in the mind that wasn't looking at it clearly, one feels, my house is pretty much in order. I just have a few things. A couple of weeks, I'll be enlightened. Go to a long retreat, it'll happen just like that. And then you get in there and you go, oh my God, I forgot about that, and I put that there, and that closet's filled with all these past relationships, and blah 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 blah, and it all starts to come out, and that's Bodhi. It's not gold yet. It's the stuff of Bodhi. It has to be transformed. So trying to repress that or deny that is unhealthy, not only because you can't, it'll come up. And psychologists are pretty clear about this. It's called the return of the repressed. You repress it and it's going to bounce back with a vehemence, often in weirder forms than it was before you repressed it. But you can't do it in the sense, because if you repress it and deny it and suffocate it, you're also repressing, denying, and suffocating this innate potential for awakening. It's one and the same. So again, there's no trick, there's no secret, it's just transformative work. Now, you could call it work and labor, or you could call it art. I mean, it depends on how you want to look at this. If you see it as art, it seems like it could be a lot more fun. If it sounds like work, unless you're got the Puritan ethic and you think work is fun, then it's, you get either way. But it's self-done. It is enacted. It is your own effort. It is your own creation. It's not a gift that's going to come from some divine mercy saying, oh, you've been sitting so long, I'm sure your legs hurt, and you're so sincere, and here's awakening, and it drops out of the roof or something, and you got it. It doesn't work like that. It comes from your own effort. In this sense, it's very much in the keeping of the spirit of self-reliance. And it says then, this line, our wandering thoughts, our wandering discursive, busy, mad mind that can't be settled, that can't see clearly, that's always scattered and attaching and grabbing, the monkey mind, and the Tathagata's body, the Dharmakaya, will be one and the same. This is important. Basically, the Tathagata's body is the transformed wandering thoughts. And the wandering thoughts is the potential of the Tathagata's body. So again, it's coming back to the same thing. And that's why he says, our delusions and anxieties, just another way of saying what we're talking about, the wandering thoughts, delusions, the anxieties. There's probably 100 terms you could give this, the angst, the anxiety, the stress, the disorder, the negative emotions, blah, 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 blah. All of that is actually the wonder of spiritual functioning. So they're equated here. And that turning those is the whole key. How do you turn them? How do you turn them? That's always the question. It's like, well, how actually do you do this smelting? How actually do you cook it up? It sounds theoretically really good, and then you get there and you're looking at all these delusions and anxieties, And, it's sort of like, for me, the first time I went into my K3 class, I just, all these Disney-like fantasies of being a teacher to the young, the children, and these pure innocent minds just eager to learn, and I was going to read them stories and edify them with, blah, 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 and it was like going into, blackboard jungle. These were untamed savages. Sorry, a few of them were good for a while, but they were looking for my jugular vein. They were just trying to find, where is it that this guy is weak? Why is he here anyhow? And why is he here instead of my mom and dad, who I really love? I don't love him. So the first one came up and actually kicked me in the shin and said, "You're not my dad." Thus began my teaching career in K3. And so, it's like, well, nothing in my manual for teaching told me what to do at this point. So when you talk about, yes, we're going to transform our delusion and anxieties into the Tathagata's body, well, what roadmap, what manual are you going to use? And this is where it gets down to being, how shall I say, being fortunate enough to be in in a good community where there's a legacy of practitioners doing this for a long period of time, and that you have some modeling without it being consciously being modeled. It's just sort of carried on in a living tradition. It's really important to have access to the text and the teachings, things like this that even give you a hint that that's what's going on, because often when the delusions and anxieties and wandering stuff appears, without the theoretical background, you make the mistake in thinking that you're not on the right path. You're not really practicing spiritual life and so forth, and you get confused. And of course, if you're really fortunate enough to find a Shanjirsher, what's called a Kalyana Mitra, a good and wise advisor, this is even better, because this is really like having your personal physician spiritually, who's really knows your case history, knows your pulse, knows everything, and not only can tell you when things go wrong, but actually can give you some presights, if you want to use that word, of what could go wrong if you don't, da-da-da. So it can actually keep you from making mistakes and not just point them out as you're making them or after you made them. So this is where it becomes one of the things that you rely on. My teacher used to say, all you really need is patience and hard work. There's nothing mystical about this. There's nothing fantastic or far out. There's no shortcuts. It gets shorter if you do what's called the Dunjiao, the direct mind, as opposed to the wandering indirect. So the more directly you come at it, the more sincere you are, and the more serious you are about it, and authentic in that, hey, this is probably the most important thing in my life, okay? And I'm going to attend to it in that way. I attend to my heartbeat, I attend to my pulse, I attend to my breathing, I take care of my body. And in that same category, maybe even more importantly, is I take care of my spiritual nature. This is what's mattering. And so when you have that seriousness, then being patient and working hard actually becomes productive, if that makes sense. If you're not serious, then even though you're patient, you're patiently waiting for something to happen that'll never materialize. The Shurangama uses the expression cooking sand hoping to get rice. You got the sand in the pot, it's cooking away, and you're really patient. You're stoking that fire, and you're patient, but you're never going to get rice from the sand because it wasn't potentially rice to begin with. It was just sand. In the same way, if you're not really sincere and pure in your intention, then as long you can be patient forever and it's not going to produce anything. So you have to have a good method. You have to have some purity on your own ground, and then you have to work at it. It's very simple. It's like anything else. My Kung Fu one of my Kung Fu teachers used to say, the secret to being a good martial artist is, first you have to have a little talent. If you don't have any talent, it's like sand, rice. Then you have to have a good teacher, because even if you have talent but you don't have a good teacher, the talent will be misdirected. And then besides having a good teacher, you really have to work hard. So he said, if you have all three, there'll be success. Any combination, two of the three, one of the three, won't work. You really work hard, and you got talent, but you don't have a good teacher. No, you got talent, you got a good teacher, you don't work hard. Put them together. All three have to be there. And then he says, and this is really terse and succinct, different name, same substance. Bodhi, afflictions, Tathagata's body, my confused state. Different names, same substance. This is the heart of the teaching in Buddhism called bu'ar, non-dual, non-duality. It means that this world and the world transcending, or this and the Buddha, are substantially, fundamentally the same. They are just in different forms or manifestations. So that's why it says afflictions just are bodhi, a bodhi is just afflictions. That's non-duality. Where is enlightenment found? It's found right here in my life, in this world, right here and now. It's not found beyond. The beyond is only another way of describing the realization of the here and now. So worldly and world transcending, the Avatamsaka says, are difference in name only. They're not different realities. This is really, really important, because what this does is bring you back, should bring us back to the ground of our own being for the cultivation, as opposed to looking outside or searching afar. Okay? So now we can move on. Anybody questions? I saw hands were stretching or going up, or went up, got an answer, came down, or I don't know. Which is it? Anything? Nobody? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Move on. As the great master Yung Jia said, anybody know who Yung Jia is, or what he's noted for? Yeah, Song of Enlightenment or Song of Awakening. He's a famous Chan master who, upon his awakening realization, wrote this incredible poem. I think we've done it here. Haven't you done it at some time here, the Song of Awakening? Hunk sure likes to put it to music. I think he's turning it into a tune with either banjo or guitar. Yeah.
It's 6 Patriarchs' disciple.
Uh-huh. So this is one of the room-entering disciples of the sixth patriarch who got it. Now, what he got was, he didn't get it from the sixth patriarch. He got his confirmation from the sixth patriarch that he'd actually understood things as they are. And so he wrote this verse. We could probably do that sometime just as a body of a text, go through it. I won't promise to sing it. I'd have to bring in somebody else to do that, but we could sing along and follow the bouncing orb. As great master Yung Jia said, quote, "The true nature of ignorance is the Buddha nature. This illusory body is the Dharma body." Unquote. If we can awaken to and understand this Dharma door, Faman, which we translate as spiritual exercise of implied non-duality. What Dharma door? The Dharma door that they're one and the same. Then we will let go of our grasping and not be ruled by emotion. And I'll come back to this line. Our inclinations towards liking and disliking will stop, will cease naturally. Every step we take will be in the pure flower treasury world, another reference, or you could say the Pure Land. Maitreya, we'll come back to this, will manifest in thought after thought. On the other hand, if we set out in search of marvelous results, that seeking or searching mind itself will be the source of samsara, of birth and death. It will hinder and obstruct our seeing. The more we seek, and the further away we will get, and we will get bored and tired. This is really quite graphic, quite direct. So let's go back. He's quoting Yung Jia, who's saying, know that the ground of awakening is also the ground of confusion. They're one and the same. There's no awakening except through working through your confusion. So the ignorance is the Buddha nature. They're one. It's the Buddha nature, if you want to use the metaphor, frozen. For example, in the Sixth Patriarch Sutra, he compares afflictions and bodhi to ice and flowing water. It's the same substance but in different forms. So here you can use this as another way of looking at it. If you understand they are the same, then you can awaken, you can use this Dharma door of practice very effectively. And when you do that, your grasping will stop, because the grasping is coming from the misunderstanding of this teaching that I don't have it. I don't have what it takes. I lack. I'm inadequate. I don't have it. You know, you have it and you have it, but I don't have it. Or the Buddha had it and Yongja had it, but I don't have it. And what he's saying is that misunderstanding leads to then the seeking, and the seeking then leads to the grasping, and the grasping leads to tying yourself up. And the free flow, the spontaneous nature of this now is impeded because it starts with the misperception that I don't have what it takes. So that's why in the Heart Sutra at the end it says, there's no knowing and nothing to get. And when you realize there's nothing to get, then completely you're unafraid, and upside down dream thinking is left behind, and so forth. Everything opens up at that point. Why? Because you realize there's nothing to get. And why is there nothing to get? Because the Buddha's stingy. Huh? You see if you're awake. You just want to give it away. It's mine. No, there's nothing to get because you have it all already. That's the sort of the power of this is, and you don't realize you have it all already because your realization is tied up in klesha and grasping and so forth. So it's a vicious circle. The only way to break it is through direct knowing, but the only way to get on that is to understand the theory here that when you get into the grasping, fearing, rejecting, and clinging, to realize I've misstepped. If I'm doing this, I have misstepped. I've stepped off the correct orientation here. So that's one way to judge whether your practice is, quote, being successful, is just simply look at what states of feeling, emotion, affliction arise. If they arise, my practice has moved off. If I'm afraid I won't get it, my practice is off. If I think I've got it, my practice is off. If I think I got it and fear I'm going to lose it, my practice is off. So either way, it's not shopping. It's not, like losing your investment like that at all. The investment is never lost. And that's why there's another saying that says, this cannot be ever departed from. If it could be lost or departed from, it wouldn't be this, by its very nature. That doesn't mean we don't appreciate it. It doesn't mean we don't recognize that it's there. And then it seems to be lacking, but it isn't actually lacking. So, if we can awaken to this, he said, and we then will be not ruled by emotion. We worked on this quite a bit because it's an important line. Anybody want to say why? What our discussion, remember what our discussion was around this? Because you could translate, you'll have no emotion. Which isn't really what's being intended here. And also, it would not be necessarily a healthy state to have no emotion, unless, I qualify this, unless you were in a situation where no emotion was appropriate. Then it would be a good thing to have no emotion. So having emotion where it's appropriate is jung, it's proper. But having emotion where it's not appropriate is, again, being off. So the thing here is not about the absence or the presence of emotion, but how it is manifest and in what situation and to what degree and so forth. So that's why we say translation is not ruled by emotion. To be ruled by emotion is you lose the discernment of when and how emotion is appropriate, healthy and unhealthy, and it completely just dominates you. This is sort of like Plato's thing about the chariot when the horses just run wild and there's no harness and you're completely just pulled along, or a ship without a rudder. So I kind of found another passage maybe to bring this out because I think somehow, I don't know why this comes up, sometimes people get the impression that cultivators of the way, Xu Ren or Dao Ren, people of the way, are like wood, like statues. And the more advanced their state, the more cold and unfeeling and impassive and unresponsive they are. They are thus unmoving. But not in the sense of, in the positive sense of that expression, thus unmoving, meaning totally in tune with things as they are, but thus unmoving is almost impervious, almost unfeeling. And this is, to my understanding, is wrong. And moreover, not only is it wrong, but if you get this idea in your head, you'll go wrong. Because you will then abuse your emotions, which become tools for awakening, because your emotions are the Tathagata's body. Oh, really? Yeah, it just said that in the text. I didn't make that up. So how you use it either is the difference between using them in a constructive, positive way, or being abused by them, or using them abusively on others. I mean, this is the full spectrum of human consciousness. Includes emotions. So if you cultivate, it's not you get rid of them, but you get rid of being ruled by them. And you're able to use them just like you can use your intelligence and your voice and your human body and all your talents as tools for the way. If you can cook for the way. If you can paint for the way. If you can sing, you can sing for the way. I mean, this is the full spectrum that we're talking about here. To think that you're dull, static, unmoving is really what the text called dull emptiness, falling into dead spirituality. And it's to be avoided. The sixth patriarch, Han Shan, all the others call this spiritual sickness. And it's attaching to a false sense of purity and stillness. And then you attach to that and you think you've arrived. And then increasingly you become cut off from the larger dimension of lives. You can't teach and transform others, and moreover you've stopped growing yourself because you're petrified. So I wanted to show you a passage that I like. I keep coming back to this as I get older. I don't know why. This is a Confucian text, actually. You know, I have to apologize. I sent it to you late today, like about 20 minutes ago. But can you bring it up? Okay, and this is from one of the 4 Confucian classics. Anybody know where this is from? Don't look down. Anybody know where this is from? Confucian goes to Hollywood. No, it's not that one. Right. Well, literally Zhongyong. So we'll look at this. Very interesting. So there's 4 Confucian, well, there's a lot of different, there's the 5 Confucian classics, and then there's these 4, which are called the 4 books, the Sishu. And the first one is the Analects of Confucius. That's the one that Henry Rosemont and Michael Nylon and Roger Ames like to talk about a lot. And then there's the Great Learning, the Da Shui, which I like a lot. That's what I did my Chinese exam at the university. And then the third one is the Zhongyong, this one. And the last one is?
The right of...
No. Mencius, Mengzi. These are considered the Sishu.
I'm wrong.
No problem. Yeah, you're thinking of the 5. That's why I said there's 5 and there's 4. So you're right. Your number was wrong. That reminds me that I'm doing my taxes, and that's my state too. My numbers are wrong, but I'm right. Okay, so in the Zhongyong, very early on in the beginning, here's the text. And this is, again, not a gifted translation. It's an early translation. This is Lege's translation. And here's how it goes. While there are no stirrings of pleasure, anger, sorrow, or joy, the mind may be said to be in a state of equilibrium. When those feelings have been stirred and they act in their due degree, there ensues what may be called the state of harmony. This equilibrium is the great root from which grow all human actings in the world, and the harmony is the universal path which they all should pursue. Let the states of equilibrium and harmony exist in perfection, and a happy order will prevail throughout heaven and earth, and all things will be nourished and flourish. Okay, so this is just one passage, very, very rich. Now, to give you a little framing, this is really early on in the text. It's in the first chapter. And the Jungyung is really interesting. It starts with saying that human nature is basically something that is whole, it's complete, and it's wholesome and good. That's where the first thing starts. So it says what heaven, Tian, has conferred on us is our nature. This is something we have naturally. It's not something that some have and some don't. To be human is to be within this natural condition, and this natural condition is very close to what Buddhist means by the original mind or the essential nature. So it's wholesome, it's good, has potential. And he says, so when we act in accord to that, when we are in sync with that, attuned to that, we are Zhongyong. We are in then the proper functioning of it. So Zhongyong here literally, I don't know, did I put the characters below? Yeah, you can see the characters. So the Zhong, interesting picture almost, right? What is the Zhong? Centered. So it's like, you could see it as a top that's spinning, but you could see it as, and so Zhongguo, literally China is the central country. Right, so Zhong means to be centered, to be right where it should be. Yung, this character, has different meanings. It does mean doing or applying. It's the same as the other Yung, like Tian Yung. But it also has a meaning of not deviating, unchanging, and therefore harmony. It has different meanings. And so when the ancients interpret this text, they go different ways with this. Some of them interpret it as doing the middle, enacting the middle. In other words, I would say, staying centered in an English expression. So staying centered, staying within your core equilibrium, staying within your natural disposition towards balance and harmony. And others use it as you are staying in the middle of moderation or the mean or harmony. Now, the reason I don't like the translation doctrine of the mean is, when I mentioned this to one of my little nieces, what are you reading, the doctrine of the mean? She said, why do you want to be mean? I said, no. I said, no, it doesn't mean that. And then I was like, how do you explain mean to a kid? Because everything they do feels appropriate. But I don't like mean because it implies sort of, maybe I'm wrong on this, but averages out. Averages out. And I don't think that's what's being talked about here. I don't think it's even talking about the mean in sense of you ever hear of the golden mean? Anybody hear of the golden mean? The golden mean? It's a concept that comes from Greek philosophy, particularly Aristotle. And he's describing a golden mean as some sort of desirable middle between two extremes. And that's the other reason I don't like to use the mean, because I don't think what this text is talking about here is a position between two extremes, as if that's the desirable position. It's like the evening news. We give you extreme right, we give you extreme left, and now you got the news. Well, wait a minute. Why don't we get some balanced reporting, insightful reporting, and saying, well, actually, this view is crazy, and this one's a little closer or something? No, but they just say, I give you two extremes, you choose the middle, and you got a balanced reporting. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. If I listened to my mother and father in an argument, and I chose the middle, I wouldn't please either, and I probably wouldn't be right. Okay? So, appropriate is better. What is appropriate? So the doctrine of appropriateness or something, or the teaching of appropriateness is a better. Because in some cases, what might seem extreme is appropriate. In other cases, what might seem like deficient is also appropriate. But Aristotle's idea that it's a desirable middle between extremes, one being excess and one being deficiency, is again a dualistic approach. And I don't think what's being applied here. I think Zhongyong here means stay right in the correct spot, not necessarily between the two extremes. For example, who am I thinking of? There was once extremism in the pursuit of goodness is not a vice. So here you're saying, I want to be extremely good, I want to be extremely fair, and so no, avoid the extreme. Well, and sort of deficiency in the pursuit of wholesomeness is not necessarily a virtue. Moderation even there is not necessarily a virtue. So again, I think what's being talked about here is something closer to being in the given state of your natural harmony and balance, and then responding appropriately in whatever situation you're in to how things accord with that nature. So that means in some cases you join the group, you join the party, you join the celebration, and other times you don't. And it doesn't mean sometimes you do and sometimes you don't, and therefore you're in the middle. Okay? I went out with that group last night, and I'm going out with this group tonight, and then I'm staying home on the third night, puts me in the middle. Well, if you went out with a band of robbers one night, and the saints you avoided, you're no longer Jungyung, you're just arbitrary or how will I say it? Middle. It's an empty middle. It's a false middle. It seems like it's moderation, but actually it's just a false middle. So what I was going here was with the emotions. He says, while there's no stirrings, and let's take these as the emotions, pleasure, anger, sorrow, joy, the mind is in equilibrium. It's just okay. It's okay to be without those. And, I mean, this may seem funny today in today's modern society. You'd say, my God, you're dead. If you don't have pleasure, anger, sorrow, joy. No, it just means very natural. Everything's okay. Children get into this quite easily. I watch children playing or something, or doing drawings or something. It's not pleasure, anger, joy, sorrow. They're just rolling on with it. Everything's fine. It says, but when those feelings have been stirred, and they act in their due degree. This is the line. Act in their due degree. When they're stirred by something comes up, and they manifest in their due degree, what's appropriate. Not too much, not too little, not too long, not too short. There ensues what we call harmony or balance. And then he's saying, then this is the route that you want to attend to. This is where you want to be. So when we go back to our text, what we're trying to say with not ruled by the emotion is something closer to what is implied in this text. That emotions coming up appropriately is part of the natural workings of the nature. It's part of the spontaneity of the true mind. And when they act in due degree, when they, like the text says, when something appears, it's reflected in the mirror, and when it's gone, the mirror is quiet again. In the same way, the mind of a cultivator responds appropriately to what it appears. If something arises that is a genuine source of joy, joy is experienced and expressed. If it's not, it's not. If something sorrowful comes up, sorrow is felt and expressed, and then is moved on. So to repress it is not to cultivate it properly, and to indulge and hang on to it is also not to cultivate it. So due degree means just appropriately as the situation calls for. It's a very subtle thing, but it's very important to understand, because if you're not able to do this, then you become ruled by your emotions, either because you indulge them and give them free rein, or probably more importantly because you repress them and deny them. You're still ruled by them either way. Oh no, No, you're ruled by them. You are now tied yourself up in fear of your emotions, just as much as, sort of the fragrant license you give to them is the other. So I don't know if this is helpful. It's really important. I've been with people, cultivators of the way, who sort of look like American Gothic. I don't know. Everybody know American Gothic? Not everybody knows what I'm talking about. You guys can do a search, American Gothic, see if you can draw up the image. Yeah, the painting. Oh, now you know American Gothic, huh? I know this is fun. You can search online. The Buddha Hall is wired. So is your nature. There you go. Can you blow that up a little bit? That's American Gothic. And I've been around people who think that that's the image, the manifestation of proper cultivation. Right? Great is the joy. And the pitchfork may be for, let's not go into the whole thing. I'm just saying, sometimes people think that's a cultivator of the way. But having been around a good teacher and then good teachers that he introduced me to, I saw the full range of human expression emotions, but always in due degree. And from that I learned that neither repression nor indulgence is the way, but something that's appropriate. I'll give you an example that just comes to mind. The master would laugh uproariously when things were really funny, usually at us, and our pretensions and our foibles and our little. For example, the nuns at one point were living together, and late in the day they like to have this practice where they would warm up some milk and drink warm milk as a drink, and there was always one nun who would do it, but then scald the milk. And then the pot got, some of you who don't do dishes have no idea what I'm talking about, but a scalded pot is really a pain to clean because it's almost like the milk welds itself to the metal, right? And you scrub and you scrub and you scrub. So the nuns that were there were all thinking, we will be greatly compassionate and kind, and we will clean this pot. And so time after time that nun would scald the milk, leave it in the kitchen, and the other nun would come down and go, oh, patience, gotta have patience, be kind. Clean it up, polish it, put it up. Next day the nun would do the same thing, scald it again. Patience, going on and on like this. And finally, and the master was just watching this and wondering where he was going to go. He thought this was pretty amusing. And then one of the nuns who sort of had a little more insight than others decided to do something. And so when the scalding pot was there in the morning, she got out a little necklace chain, and the pot had a little hole on the handle, and she wore it around her neck. So she just walked around with this scalded pot around her neck. And of course, when the other nun who had been doing the milk saw that, it was like, oh, oh, I see, my dirty pot is becoming a burden to all of you. Oh, I get it. And when they told the story, the master just laughed uproariously. He thought that was really funny. The whole thing was really funny. And he wasn't like, American Gothic. He said, this is really funny. This is good. At another time, I was sitting next to my teacher, and this was a conference where a number of sociologists and teachers were presenting on the condition of children at that time in America, and particularly on some of the abuse and neglect that was going on. And some of it was actually pretty powerful and, as you might guess, graphic. And at one point when it was really getting into detail, not only what was being done to the children, but the lasting effects on their behavior, on their personalities, on their prospects for being full, and here it says nourished and flourishing human beings, when the deleterious effects of that became statistically documented, and what the results were, I looked over and I could see a tear rolling down my teacher's eye. And I thought at the time, I thought my teacher had no emotions. But what the tear was his absolute appropriate sadness and grief for the loss of youth, for the loss of the potential of a young person. And the sadness of seeing that wasted by this neglect and abuse and so forth. And then why, after that, he even more further said to us, you really need to do a good job with the schools. You really need to be in educational roles, nurturing and developing children. So it went from tear, which is appropriate, to then moving on to an action that would correct. But in both cases, you could say his enthusiasm, his fervor for teaching was emotion, as much as his grief for the plight of the child was also an emotion. But it was in due degree. So I share this with you only to bring out this passage tonight, of the text of not being ruled by a motion. And we'll stop there for now and then pick this up next week. By the way, the next couple sections coming up are really quite concrete, and I would say pragmatic for those of you who are doing the practice. I think you'll find them quite useful. Okay, that's it for tonight. Any lingering short questions that involve a yes or no? Good. Any announcements? Anything coming up people need to know about? Tomorrow night, lecture here again?
Yep.
Avatamsika. Anything going on Sunday?
We actually have the Buddha recitation all day. It's a very slow recitation.
Okay.
You haven't done it before, you can see how slow it is. Just give meditation.
We do have other calendars. It's on the bench by the door, so feel free to take these. You realize what it equals. So.
I'll pick up mine next year. Okay, we'll do the transference in English.
May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.
Ah.